Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Remette RT Peregrine Falcon. A very interesting knife. I unboxed this quite a while ago. So the way that the lock disengages, which by the way is essentially a liner lock, you push the pivot in and there's a tab or something that gets under and actuates the liner from the back rear side of the knife and moves the lock out of the way, allowing the blade to close, which is really cool. We've seen this before kind of in like button-operated liner locks. That's essentially what this is, but the button is the pivot. There's a spring underneath that pivot. We're going to talk about that pivot because that's the cool thing, and it's also kind of a flaw, kind of. There's a lot of really cool things about this knife, and I actually really like it overall. I'm going to link it right down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Remette for supplying this knife for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. This does come in a few different configurations. They vary slightly in price. I think there's 4 configurations. I'll let you guys check those out if you want to. Let's go ahead and measure this knife. So the overall length of the Peregrine Falcon comes in, surprisingly, not quite 8 inches. I really thought it would be. 7.75 inches. Blade length is coming in at 3.5. Cutting edge, slightly over 3.25. How about some size comparisons? Any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others, up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. You can see here it is closer to the size of the 8020.5, but it is far more robust. This doesn't feel anywhere near like the 8020.5. It's quite a bit thicker. It definitely has a full-size knife feel. It's just not quite as titanic as the 8010. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, close to the size of the Para 3, just way more robust. And then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action? You guys remember, I think the first one that I remember, the first company that I remember that like really tried to make the button actuation, like the pivot actuation, the lock, a big deal was CRKT. And I remember being really excited to try it. And the system they created was super strong. It was just really lackluster in the action department, right? And a lot of us, you know, that are looking at knives in this territory, we know that we can get utility for $50 or less. I mean, heck, we can get like great utility for $20 or less. That's easy. Finding a knife that will do knife tasks is easy. You do not need to be a blade scholar. Yes, I've traveled the roads less traveled of the wizards of the blade. You don't know. You just like, it's so easy nowadays to find a good, in this territory, we're looking for more than that. We're looking for things that are off the beaten path, right? In just like kind of a fun way, not necessarily a utilitarian way, just kind of fun. We like the fidgety. We still want the premium materials. We want the fun stuff, but you know, it's kind of like, sometimes people put lift kits on Monte Carlos. Why? I don't know. You know, but that's what they're into. You know, they know that that's not going to make it go faster, but they just like it, right? I'm not saying that that's a weird comparison what I just did there, but because this is still definitely in the realm of convenience, right? You could say that by extension, this has utilitarian benefits because it makes it super duper convenient. And that's true. Pushing that button is very satisfying, and partially because it's so big, but also because it's bowled out in the middle, right? It's like a very shallow bowl. You push it in, you can feel that spring squish down, not in like a crunchy way, but you can feel it push down and release the liner lock, right? You push it in and it moves this out of the way. It feels really good. It feels well designed and dependable, you know? Because it's not some weird plunge lock. We've all come to not like most of us have come to not trust plunge locks, right? Or standard button locks. A lot of times what we want to see is a button, because we all like to push buttons, right? We want to see a button-operated liner lock, or better yet, a button-operated compression lock, which is substantially more reliable and has an actual detent, which this also does, right? And by the way, you can simply use the liner to disengage it, which is kind of cool, right? It's neat. But it has an actual detent ball instead of, I think we can probably see it. It's way in there, but you can, yeah. I think we can maybe see that detent ball writing on there. There you go. Rather than the plunge lock acting as the detent, which was, it's something like on the Crowley, right? This little cylindrical lock slides into place, and that's also what creates the detent, which is fine, but not nearly, just doesn't feel nearly as good. So anyways, this is really cool. The action feels really good, feels very well executed. The deployment of the knife is a little bit odd. This is one of those knives where they hid a large portion of what would be used to deploy the knife underneath the frame. So everything looks really cool. I understand that's subjective. I guess the lines all flow together and it kind of has this like obvious theme, right? But you got to dig at it a little bit. It's not that bad. You can get there, right? But I don't want to have to dig. I want the whole thing to be accessible, right? So it's fine. Front flipping it, I don't really like that. You can push the button and swing it out too, if you want to. That's, I don't know. It's okay. If you like doing that, then that's fine. But I like to be able to thumb flick it and reverse flick it easily. Truthfully, thumb flicking it this way for me, I think is a little bit easier. Of course, you also have the option of just wheeling it out or pinch opening it out like a regular person. Overall, deployment is really fun, especially on disengagement. Like the button makes it fun and cool and kind of different. But deploying it like traditionally, like using your middle finger, your index finger, your thumb is okay. It could be better, but it's all right. Let's go ahead and do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. This is what I mean. Like this is a pretty thick fellow, pretty heavy duty, robust fellow. Length and, why am I doing these voices? Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. It's really not all that big of a deal. Like it doesn't translate to pocket discomfort, right? But it might be a weird transition depending on what you're carrying. The same could be said of anything. Length and height, it's not quite as tall as the Para 3, but it's definitely going to carry bigger and heavier just because of all the titanium. So what do we have for materials here before we weigh it? Titanium, in this case, we have that lightning anode titanium, not titanium Damascus, but it does have that cool look. It's nice and polished, right? You can get versions that are slightly less expensive. I want to say they're like $10 less expensive. To not have the lightning anode or the flamed titanium. I'm not sure why that's worth $10 more, but okay. But I think this is probably the coolest looking version. If you don't want the super colorful version, I think they have more basic versions. But titanium, anodized titanium, titanium backspacer, titanium pocket clip, and then we have an M390 blade. What's the Rockwell hardness on the M390? 60 to 61, which is perfectly acceptable. I think that's just fine. In my opinion, which is just my opinion and not absolute fact, on the general geometry that we would expect from a utilitarian folding cutting apparatus, which this is fine geometry, right? M390 I think should be at the very least 60 HRC, and then anything, you know, 60 all the way up to like 63 I think is amazing. So that's fine. I think that's really great. Weight. Do we have milling for weight reduction? We certainly do. You can see it in there. Let's take a look here. The weight is coming in at 4.8 ounces, which honestly isn't bad. I really thought this would be over 5 ounces. The balance on this is actually right behind the pivot, so it feels really good. I think it's probably just the chunkiness, and it's not. I don't want to get people thinking that this is like a super duper fat. It's just a lot thicker than a lot of other knives, you know, at this size, I guess. So that's nice. 4.8 ounces, not bad, but the, you know, the overall blade to weight ratio, not spectacular. And 4.8 ounces is going to be heavy for a lot of people. It's not too bad for me. I'm used to carrying knives of this size. And certainly people who carry like monster cold steel knives are just going to, you know, fold their arms and laugh into the sky or whatever they do. I don't know. You hardcore cold steel guys that like love to carry those monster oversized knives. I think they're cool too, but you guys remind me of like cartoon side villains, like, or like anime, you know, like it's like a one season side villain that takes himself a lot more seriously than like anybody else. It's like some of the bad guys in One Punch, right? I don't know who you're performing for, but it is fun. It's just comical for me to read the comments, though. But anyways, some people are going to find this quite a bit more robust than what they're used to carrying. Let's see here. Let's do the hardware check. I think that's an important... Actually, you know, before we do that, because the hardware check is a big part of this review, let's measure the blade stock thickness, okay? So blade stock thickness is coming in at 135 thousandths, about middle of the road. So that's fine. Before we do the hardware check, let's talk about how this knife looks. I think this is super cool. Remette has really been like doing some awesome stuff. Paying attention to community feedback, innovating and doing like nothing that they have done is absolutely brand new, but they are taking things that we enjoy or things that we've seen before and altering them in ways that we haven't necessarily seen before and making really fun, interesting things, right? They are clearly not out to make the next bug out, right? A lot of companies, for some reason, are like, we got to make like a bug out knife because the bug out is like really popular. Yeah, that's a great idea. Wow, you know, like nobody's ever seen that before. Yeah, like there's plenty of that stuff out there. So it's nice to see companies like Remette doing some different things and, you know, doing fun, in this case, kind of like a futuristic, you know, aesthetic. It's honestly very comfortable. There's enough material here that, you know, like the thickness of the material, it might be kind of, I guess, startling. Or so, like people will be surprised when they get this at how much thicker the handle is than they think. Again, not crazy, just thicker than you'd think. But it's pretty comfortable, right? There's no jimping up here. I really feel like there should be. I mean, there is, but it's only for the front flipper, and it's useless. So I would prefer that there was jimping all the way out to here. There are two issues here. Number one, they're definitely, Remette, you got to start like for lefties. You got a mill spot for lefties for the pocket clip. Like that's just crazy. Start doing that. The first issue outside of the pocket clip thing is the fact that, and I brought this up in the unboxing a long time ago, if you're going to choke up on this, your index finger goes right to the button, which is the thing you use to disengage the lock. The lock itself, it's like a liner lock with appropriate geometry. It's fine, right? But if you squeeze on it, you're going to go to disengage it, right? So why did you give us this position here? The lock needs to have something else keeping it in place, right? If you have like a safety or something like that. I mean, if the pivot is going to be the thing that you use to disengage it, you either have to have something else that holds that lock in place, or don't give us this area right here that suggests that we're supposed to choke up. Because this is how you're going to hold it, like this, right? So just don't do that. Like this area should all just be blade, essentially. Here's the other thing. Unless I'm mistaken, the the way that the pivot comes out is by turning it. I think I watched Neve's video from a long time ago. He just like twisted it off. Now I've tried, I've dug at this thing, and I can't. It's fine. I'm sure the Loctite that's on there eventually will wear out and I'll be able to undo it. I don't like that that's how we get in there. I mean, there is no other way to get after the pivot. Like how it comes apart and goes back together is pretty simple. It's not super crazy. There's a coil spring underneath here, so you kind of have to make sure you keep track of that. But you got a couple of, you know what? Let's go ahead and get out my tools. If you don't know, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel, or the pinned comment. Something going on upstairs. Holy moly. I think the body screws are actually T6, which is a kind of a bummer, but you know, what are you going to do? Yeah, T6 here. Okay, no big deal. Couple on each side, couple of T6 screws for the pocket clip. And then, yeah, you either are able to twist the pivot off right when you get it, or if it's like mine, like I've been doing this all day trying to grab at it. Remette, just put like, I've seen the pivot out. There is no reason why it should, like, we can't just have a Torx head in there, right? Just allow us to get into, why is this being sealed off? And it's not even being completely sealed off. Like, I've seen other people, like, be able to twist it, but that's stupid. Like, just give us the, just give us a Torx head in there, right? Yeah. If, I'll tell you what would make this absolutely phenomenal, just recapping everything, right? We definitely need a tool access to the pivot. Number one. Number two, just don't even give us this forward choil area. Just give us some more blade, and that way nobody's tempted to choke up on it, right? Even if we did manage to get the blade like back to here or something, right? Let's say the sharpened edge came like right to here. Yeah, it's close, but your finger would stay off the pivot. Then you'd really have to go out of your way. You'd be wrapping your index finger around the initial sharpened portion of the edge to choke up, and you just don't need to do that, right? You wouldn't need to do that because the edge came clear to here, right? So don't give us this choke up spot if the button's going to be the area that we use to disengage the lock, right? And then finally, pocket clip. Like give lefties the ability to carry this. Finally, don't close this area off, like especially back here. Like just get, like if you're going to have this whole thing, that or extend this ledge so that we can get at it. Because honestly, that ledge is not bad. You can kind of get at that ledge. I just don't like to have to spend an extra millisecond searching for the optimal position to put my finger before I deploy it. I want the thing to deploy with I want the thing to deploy with half a brain cell, right? I don't want to dedicate any... I already have my own personal staff working overtime, so to speak. I don't want to have to dedicate any more. So this is really, really cool. I love this. And it, again, like I see stuff like this and it makes me think like this is an indication of the direction they're headed. I think the people who are, doing their internal designs are pretty motivated, and the stuff is cool, right? And it's obviously made well. Remette is doing a great job with their execution and their materials. This is awesome, right? It's just little tiny things that I wish were thought about a little bit better. So if you're looking for like a nice premium kind of like something a little bit different, and you're in this general ballpark, like this is really fun, right? But if you're gonna take this out and like use it seriously, there will be times where you want to choke up, and maybe you forget, maybe you take a chunk out of your finger, right? Not super fun. But the locking system works. We just need to be able to take it apart easily, right? I don't want to have to just use thumb friction. So yeah, really cool. This is more expensive than we generally see from Remette. I feel like, a lot of their premium stuff hovers between 200 and 220. This starts at 245. But you are getting, kind of a cool, interesting mechanism. And the other thing is they've nested a titanium liner with a steel lock bar insert, which is pretty like out of the way cool. A lot of times with these designs, they just put in a steel lock bar, which is just as cool, just as good, right, functionally. But they did a titanium nested liner with a steel lock bar insert. So a lot of people like to reduce. Nobody ever makes it to the point in this video where I go over this, right? But you got a lot of new people, right, who are 100% their value system is materials. That's what we see the vast majority of the time. M390 and titanium should cost blank, and there's no brain power involved whatsoever in thinking about how much longer something would take under the machines, right? A more complicated, right? So, you take 2 blocks of titanium, you make one as a simple shape and one as a super intricate, ultra complicated shape with a bunch of like texturing and milling, and then they put like, maybe layers of other materials into the titanium. They have to machine those pieces and the area in the titanium where the inlay goes in. You have to make sure that these machines are, continuously creating these pieces with super, super tight tolerances so that you have general consistency across the board. Obviously, the second thing I'm describing is going to cost a lot more money. For some reason, this way of thinking is lost on so many people. YouTube Shorts community. Sorry, it was a weird cough. Oddly specific. Sounded like I said something really specific, though, there. Yeah. But, no, there's... there's definitely some consistency in that, though. Yeah, no. There's a little bit more going into something like this than, you know, your triangle, rectangle, titanium M390 from Amazon design. Yeah, it's higher than what we normally see from Remette, but I don't think it's absolutely ridiculous. I'd feel a lot more better about that price tag if all of these little criticisms were corrected. I don't know. It's cool. Not something I'm going to say people should be like kicking down doors to get. But if you do buy this and you're okay, like, well, let's say this. If you're okay with the criticisms I've given this, if you're like, that stuff won't bother me, then you'll love this knife. It's really, really cool, for sure. And apparently a lot of people love it because I think their first batch of it sold out like super fast. So you should be able to get this right now, though. So anyways, that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. I'll link this knife down in the description. Check it out if you want to. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, and I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.